All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should be used at the listener's discretion. All right, dude, well, welcome back. Might as well kick into this one. Happy Dunkin' Donuts Coffee Day.
Delicious.
And took last week off, did a Rescue 1 CBD one, which brings me to my product affiliates. Had it written down in my notes
right
here.
off the bat.
Rescue 1 CBD, 0.000 THC, safe for the job. And if you want to learn more about it, go to last week's podcast. It's a replay from 2022, I think, where I interviewed Jon, the owner, and pretty cool dude and pretty cool company. So go check it out. Use code TAILBOARD at checkout for 15% off. And then my other product affiliate is Fourth Frontier. It's a heart rate monitoring company, so they sell a fitness tracker strap, just like any other one that would go on your chest and record your heart rate and your respirations and all that stuff, except for it's more than that because they provide lead to EKG on their readouts also. So totally different thing. Go check it out. I have a 25% discount code for that one. Check out Fourth Frontier on social media. Go order a strap. Okay, we got done with that pretty quick.
It's a cool way to show your heart rate going up high from weightlifting.
Well, in the 180s possibly. Oh yeah, and we had our first. I've done 2 workouts now with Curt in a professional setting. Both felt familiar and tough, and I once again felt glad I only do that once a week, so I could just pour it on and go home and then feel.
I was real pissed off the other day with the. Well, also I knew you were
strong.
Yes, for sure. It's really weird because you and me usually lag behind everyone else in workouts. And then all of a sudden you were hurrying and I'm like, oh, he's going to rush through this because he got to pick Nathan up. Yeah. I didn't realize that you were just doing 2 of the 4 rounds essentially. And so when you loaded up,
I think I did 3. I think I got
3 of the 4 rounds.
Yeah.
When you loaded up on the trap bar that early, I'm like, come on. I'm like, I don't want to do this today. And, then I'm like, oh, this is what he's doing. I'm like, all right, I got one more round to dial it back a little bit, but God, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah. So funny you should mention that. I was actually frustrated because I was like, I got to go lighter so I can get through these 3 rounds quicker.
Great. Even better.
Because otherwise I would have had a minute between each thing.
Yeah.
Or
Why
so.
don't you kick my dog while you're here?
Jeez. But yeah, I was actually like, oh man, I really want to load up on these reverse lunges and the trap bar hold, but I got to get going. Mm-hmm. I got to turn this into a cardio event. Yeah. And I'm like, so I'll go I'll tone it down to like a 7 out of 10, get through this thing.
Perfect.
The sprints I did fast though. The sprints I poured it on as hard as I could. But yeah, the other stuff, yeah, so sorry, but it felt good, man. But yeah, I wouldn't have, even at the stuff I was doing, I would have been not able to do that again the next day. Like I think I did nothing or a bike ride the next day, like an hour-long zone 2, nothing ride. So, I mean, you win some, you lose some. Mm-hmm. I tend to lose a lot more than I win on that. But, that's a good opener to the conversation today. As you get older, Curt, you might not know this. Our bodies change and things change. I'm happy to report that I'm now under doctor's supervision taking a performance-enhancing drug.
Congratulations.
She said it takes 4 weeks to kick in, so I got to take it every day for 4 weeks and then see how I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Do you consider a beta blocker a performance enhancer?
No.
You don't?
Do you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's illegal in some not sports. Darts, pool. I think it's illegal.
Is it really?
Yeah, because it keeps your heart rate low, so you're not as shaky. It keeps your nerves down. Right, your nerves are high, but it doesn't affect your heart rate.
Activities, though. I mean,
golf.
Activity.
Yes, baseball.
Sport. Elite sport.
Okay. So yeah, so I asked her can I still get up to like 180? Because I want the top end for the leisure stuff, working out, riding bikes and stuff, but also at work. Like I need to be able to get up to 180. She's like, yeah, eventually. It's going to take you a little bit longer. So I'm curious to see like in that lead up phase, do I feel like crap? Am I like my brain and my muscles need more blood and it's just not there because I'm limited on the rate? So I'm kind of curious to see what happens. Or do I feel better because it's going to make me slow down and I'll use everything more efficiently instead of just running away?
Yeah.
Because I think.
What is there a compensation then for the reduced heart rate? Does your stroke volume go up?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. No, I think you're under pumping. You're undersupplying the tower at that point. That's what I think. But I think I'm at such a low dose, I'm gonna overrun it, I think.
Yeah.
Because we kind of figured out, like, instead of taking a blood pressure medication and a beta blocker, I got a super excitable heart. Like it's in my history. I had, for all you medics out there that pretend you're good at medicine, I had a WPW when I was younger, which is just an extra important nerve in the heart, the one that makes the beats. You remember from your years as a medic.
Yeah, going, gone.
Extra. Yeah, you wink back at it. The SA node, I had 2 SA nodes. So I had basically 2 heartbeats. When my heart rate got above, I don't know, like 150, they would both turn on. So that was cool. So they went in and ablated it with a cauterizer.
But that was more recent, though, the ablation, right?
No, that was when I was 16. But then I thought I had it again at LGN. So I wore a Holter monitor.
I remember wearing the Holter monitor. So you didn't get an ablation again?
No.
Okay.
No, that was when the doctor basically said, like, no, you're just weak and undertrained. Like, your heart rate is high because you're fat. I was like,
thanks. Cool. Take my copay, thanks.
So I was like, yeah, it happens during this and during this. He's like, well, for how long? I'm like, usually like right after, and then it goes away. He's like, that's you being out of shape and recovering. I was like, cool. Appreciate it, doc. Take my copay. So that was the resolution from that. But I was telling the doctor, like, dude, as soon as I start doing anything, and we've talked about like walking up the stairs and stuff, but even just like when I'm sitting down, I'm easily in the 70s for a heart rate.
Yeah.
I only get down to the 60s, maybe below that when I'm sleeping, like when I wore the heart rate strap overnight. And if I go walk out to the car now, I'll be at like 90 just walking around. So she's like, I think if we control the excitability a little bit, maybe that your blood pressure will come down naturally because you're not just bombarding your system. So we'll see. But in a larger scope, in the topic of today, I had a conversation with a client that I sent you that I was like, well, that's a good thing to revisit because one of my clients has a history of a back injury and it flared up. We tried to do back squats again 3 weeks ago, something like that. And he had worked out a couple days before. He had gone to shift a few times and he woke up with a little bit of discomfort the day after his back squat day. And then it got worse and worse and worse to the point where we had to go to the doctor and get like muscle relaxers because it felt like the initial injury that happened a few years ago. So we kind of worked our way through it. It's a couple of weeks later now and he's feeling pretty good. But I told him, like, all right, we'll just avoid back squats for a little bit, for a while till we can see what's going on and then we'll work you back in. And he was like, well, no, I want to keep doing them. Like, I don't want to stop doing a movement that's beneficial. I said, well, I don't think it's beneficial. Like, you did them for the first time in a few years. They went terribly wrong.
Right.
We obviously still have a pain point there. So let's work on some other stuff and get your strength back up, and then we'll see what happens. And he dropped a line that I was not expecting. He said, well, isn't that a gold standard of weightlifting, of strength? And I was like, well, no, I'm not sure what a gold standard would be necessarily, but it made me think of, like, maybe that's just the big 3 powerlifting movements. So it's a well-known standard of strength, squat, bench, and deadlift thing. So now I went into the conversation of like whatever gets you the most gain without the most risk, and whatever makes you be able to lift stuff without going to the doctor for pain pills and muscle relaxers. That's your gold standard. And he agreed to it through the course of the conversation, but it brings up something we ran into several times at the gym and just with ourselves of like, what's worth it anymore? What are we willing to get rid of? So I wanted to kind of open up that talk as like, first of all, how do we figure out what's beneficial and not? And then in our workout the other day, you had mentioned a standard of grip strength, which I liked, which I never really thought of before because I'm used to just grabbing 45-pound plates, putting them away
in each hand.
And I figure that's just how people do it. But you brought up like, oh, this metric is pretty good for grip strength. So I think we can throw some of those out too, some loose ones,
Grip strength. So a pretty good standard for grip strength is if you can hold your body weight up for 30 seconds. And whether that's with dumbbells or you load up a trap bar, is a pretty good standard for measuring grip strength. There has been a significant amount of studies lately showing the better grip strength, the greater mortality you have. So some people, I think Raph even sent us a video the other day that there's clinics that are measuring grip strength as part of like their vital signs, just to get that as a baseline too. So that ends up being one that we pull out either through like dead hangs or like we did the other day, loaded holds. Yeah. But you can work that in with loaded carries too. So, but yeah, that's one that we've thrown in relatively recently.
I like that one. Do you want to throw out our general strength standards first, or do you want to go into like exercise selection when it's not worth it to do back squats kind of conversation first?
We can go into exercise selection, I think.
Okay.
For me, so when we coached at LGN, we kind of looked at either if we had someone who had an injury or something that was bothering someone, we looked at ways to adjust the movement to get them to a position where they could get value of working out with a reduced risk of injury or pain trigger. Because in the reality is it's like, if you back squat and you hurt yourself and you're down for 6 weeks, that's 6 weeks of everything that you're missing, right. Whereas if we just adjust one movement, you get into that old, like, it's that cheesy saying, the best ability is availability.
I like it.
And so like you don't lose 6 weeks of training and progression because of one movement, And so if we looked at like back squat, for instance, and that was giving someone a problem, we would look first at reducing the load. And so instead of saying we're doing like a heavy set of 3 to 5, we would reduce it down to like, let's do some lighter 10 to 12s and see how that feels. And if that was still a problem, we would reduce, or we would change the where the load was. So we might say, okay, instead of doing a back squat, we're going to do a goblet squat, or we're going to do maybe a barbell front squat. So something where we're just changing the positioning, but we're not changing the movement itself. From there, we'd probably go down to just some isometrics with the same movement. And if we're still having pain there, then we're probably changing the movement at that point to a different lower body push. So maybe a split squat, or a lunge is more comfortable for them. So we're still getting a lower body pushing movement, just unilateral instead of bilateral to avoid pain trigger at that point. So that would usually be our progression when coaching people at LGN.
So the most common one, though, that I think if you were left to your own devices and you didn't have that available education, I think what most people do is shorten the range of motion.
For sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what inherent issues have you found, or do you think of when people are like shortening range of motion? It could be push-up, squat, overhead press, right?
Usually they're not getting to the range of motion that causes them problems anyways. And so then you're leaving a gap for, okay, well, if I shorten down to like a quarter back squat, and I feel good, at some point I'm going back to what I feel is a full back squat, and now I haven't solved that problem yet. So for me, that usually ended up being the deal there. But do you have a different thing you were?
I think at a certain point you lose the point of the movement.
For sure.
Like if the point of the movement is to convince yourself that you can still back squat 315, then at that point you're not performing the movement anyways.
Right.
So then you get to set your own rules on what successfully back squatting 315 is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you may be very well just unrack the thing and barely flinch and go back out and be like, yep, I can still lift 315.
Right.
And call that your version of a back squat now. But it's so arbitrary and what people judge as their own bottom or their own movement quality that you're, like you said, you're going to kind of hamstring yourself into not completing anything, and then you leave that gap that's unsolved. And then specifically for us, then when you go to test that, lifting a patient or moving a hose or picking something up, then you are exposed.
Right.
Like now the movement standard isn't in your control, it's in the control of the objective.
Yeah.
And that's where you get hurt, right? Mm-hmm. So you can have guys that will be like, well, back squatting hurts. I'm not going to do body weight squats. That's for aerobics. I'm just going to do the elliptical. And then they have to pick up something, their back hurts for 3 days, right, or they get significantly hurt and they're off the job because they've chosen to go around that path altogether. Mm-hmm. Which, as you're saying, is if you have problems with a back squat when both your feet are even and you have something locking up your shoulders, you can still get into 90 degrees of hip flexion and knee flexion just doing a lunge. And maybe over the course of time that helps your hips work more functionally. Yep. And now you can get down to a real back squat, but it's that investment in the alternative that I think a lot of people either don't know about or avoid because
right,
if they like doing lunges in the first place, they'd be doing lunges. They like doing back squats, right?
And, I think too, like, I think it gets back to what you said before is there's a specific gold standard measurable for back squat or bench press or deadlift, and I think people have a fear of missing out on some of that stuff when that's what they're probably comfortable with. Because, like back squats, like they're technical.
Yeah.
But most people can go in and just start that right away. There's not a big balance component to it. It's like, so a lot of people can just go in and put weight on a bar and squat it. And even if you squat it with a weird stance or your heels elevate off the ground, like you're still doing it. Yeah. Lunging, there's a big balance component. It takes up more space, blah, blah, blah. So I think people have like a fear of missing out of like a movement that they're just comfortable and familiar with.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, like you said, there's nobody knows the record for barbell lunges, like one on each. Like, nobody knows that. Nobody tests that. There's no competition for it anywhere. So, so I think there's that. I think there's also like, even currently with the group that I train now, they're coming to me because I'm awesome, but they're also coming to me because they don't know what to do, and they value the experience that you and I both have on being able to get them through workouts. And even still, like someone will come in with shoulder pain and I'll say, here's your movement for today. And then there's like a little bit of frustration sometimes with it. And it's like, you're doing the same pattern just differently, and we're not going to bother your shoulder, and you're going to get a great workout out of this. But I feel like sometimes because there's the isolation or the lack of involvement in one thing, it's a detriment. And it's like, it's not. That's the value you're getting in coming and working with the group, is the education of like, here's how you can still do this and benefit and prosper just differently,
Yeah, I think we ran into it a lot with deadlifts at LGN too, of like people would be real hesitant to elevate their deadlift off the ground on boxes or on plates. And you had to have when you step back and look at it, you ask the person, well, like, can you tell me why a 45-pound plate or an Olympic plate is the size that it is? Like, why is that 9.5 inches off the ground? Why is that the standard for your bar height to start? And they'll be like, well, I don't know. Like, because that's the size the molds were when they made the plates, and then they just stuck with it, and it sounds pretty cool. That's why. Like, it's nothing scientific. It's not, they didn't pull everybody's femoral length and lumbar spine and say like, 9.5 inches of starting bar. That's perfect where we got to be. It's not the optimal strength curve for anybody. It's not anything besides like, hey, that's what that is now. So everybody keep buying them, and then that's the standard, right? So when you break out of like the weird kind of arbitrary imposed demands of the fitness system, and that sounds really like big government stuff, like I'm saying birds aren't real, right? But when you start thinking of like, well, I need this exercise to work for me instead of me working for the exercise, all of a sudden you have someone who hasn't deadlifted in 10 years without back pain on a trap bar with them elevated on 45-pound plates, and they're like, yeah, I'm not traditional deadlifting, but I just lifted 225 pounds off the ground. I haven't done that in a decade, so that's pretty cool, right? Yep. So I think it takes a little bit of patience and maturity in the coach to have those conversations, because there's definitely been times I can remember at the gym where I'm like, then just hurt your back. Go ahead. Right. Like I've tried to convince you enough, and it's worth it to you to be limping around for 2 weeks. So go for it. Besides squats and deadlifts, what's a good alternative for like, or how would we help people for upper body movements like push-ups, pull-ups, overhead pressing and stuff like that? Because that's definitely one that I would say that squat and deadlift are like the big ones people want to do. When it comes to overhead pressing, they're like, haven't thought about it, or it's less frequent. And then pull-ups for a lot of people are just non-starters.
So for me, pull-ups, I regress people to a dead hang and just see if even being in that position is tolerable. Because if you have to do 5 pull-ups, you have to be able to hang on the bar for 10 minutes. Whoa, 10 seconds. 10 minutes would be awesome.
Yes.
Grip strength. You live forever.
Super long.
So you have to, so if 10 seconds hurts your shoulder just to hang there, then trying to do a pull-up's not making that any better. So for me, I'm changing the angle that you're pulling at. And so we might move to a cable machine or a band and do like a pull kind of a pull down at maybe a 45-degree angle and see how that feels. Because now we're kind of in between a horizontal and a vertical pull, and just see how that feels. And if that's a problem, then I'm probably moving to a full like row at that point, like an inverted row or a TRX row, something where we're not even pulling in a horizontal or a vertical plane anymore. We're just pulling horizontally. And really the same thing with pressing too. If for me, if I'm in barbell overhead press, most likely I'm moving to dumbbells. I'm probably taking some joints out of the equation too. So if it's like a standing barbell press and that's bothersome to people, and I change them to dumbbells and that's bothersome, I'll probably go down to like a half kneeling position or a seated position and take some instability of, their lower body out of the equation and kind of lock that down and see if that feels good. And if at that point it's a problem, then we're probably moving to a horizontal.
Yeah.
And seeing how that feels.
This is going to span quite a distance in exercise specific stuff, but do you remember the conflict we had with using a band to assist with pull-ups versus doing negatives?
Yeah, we were missing the hardest part. So you were getting helped on the easiest part of a pull-up.
Yeah. And
you were missing the hardest part of a pull-up. The band gave you the most help at the hardest part.
Which was counterintuitive, because I think for a lot of people, the initial pull of a pull-up is the hardest part, mm-hmm. because they haven't really experienced the top end of it and what that should look like.
Right.
Ideally.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people will compromise a lot of their shoulder position in the top of one, but it completes because their chin came over the bar.
Right.
But if you were to put yourself in like the ideal pull-up position at the top of it, it's much more of a struggle to maintain that than it is just
mm-hmm.
to start the first 6 inches of a pull.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then we eliminated like chin over the bar. We're just going to go over like a hit list of stuff we adjusted.
Yeah,
to
we
make
stopped
it more
calling them pull-ups. We just started calling them vertical pulls.
Yeah.
So then people didn't care if they got their chin over the bar. You were just pulling yourself in a vertical plane.
Yeah.
But then that also let us relatively easily regress to pull downs, because you were still doing a vertical pull.
Yeah.
It was the same movement, just different,
So the emphasis on this whole thing, though, was like, what's the point, first of all? Like, is the point to do a number of pull-ups, or is the point to be able to move yourself vertically while hanging from a bar, right?
Right.
Is the point to do a back squat, or is the point to be able to get to like 90 degrees hip flexion and knee flexion with some ankle flexion in there,
mm-hmm.
and then produce force and get up from a seated position?
Right.
And so when you change it, that was the whole goal of a lot of stuff we did at LGN, was like, let's kind of get out of the conformity here and start making people, because we know that for you translated into longer clients, right? Getting more money, mm-hmm. because they're not going to leave after 2.5 years. Do you remember? I remember saying this to a lot of clients on their onboarding, was like the average turnover for gyms in the area was like 1.5 to 2 years, but ours was at like 5.5 years, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that was a lot of because we weren't afraid to modify everything to keep someone moving, and mm-hmm. the goal of them was like pick up their kids or go on a bike ride, not get through the NFL combine.
Yeah.
If I name off movements, do you think you can come up with what you would like to see people do in the fire service? Which may be more or less than Gen Pop. But I got a couple in mind.
I'm not sure I'm following, but let's try it.
If I ask you how many pull-ups should firefighters be able to do, what would you think?
Should they be able to do?
If I came to you and said I can do this many pull-ups, at what point would you be like, that's pretty good? Or what point would you be like, we got to work on those because that's below standard?
If you could do 8 pull-ups the first time I'm meeting you, I'd be happy with that.
I was going to say 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8's aggressive. I'm down with it, though.
I mean, 5, I'd be like, okay, so good, I would say, is 8. Like, okay. I'm good. Sweet, you're doing a good job.
Okay.
5, I would be like, sweet. Like 3 and below, I'm like, yeah, we need to do something here.
Okay.
For males.
Okay. What about females?
If you can do 3 to 5 as a female, that's awesome.
That's good. I'm glad it's not 1, because to steal the old CrossFit saying, like, you can't scale life, brother. So it's just a unique profession, mm-hmm. where it's like you don't get to tap out if you have something to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say like a deadlift and a squat, but I think that kind of loses the focus of the talk. What I had in mind was like, how much weight should one person be able to move off the ground? So that's where I'm getting out of like traditional squat deadlift. But like if I put someone on their preferred method, trap bar, right? How much weight would you be like, oh, good, that's enough pounds where I'm happy with where you're at. And we don't need to focus.
If you could lift your body weight off of the ground, I think that's a good. You're okay at that point.
Okay. Well, we got some skinny people. So for some people, like 165 is okay, or should there be a number?
I think it's a starting spot. I don't think there's a fixed number.
You don't think so? I would put it like 225 to 250 of whatever modality you want. Get it off the ground.
Get it off the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I'm not going to disagree. I'm not going to disagree with you on it. I think that if you can deadlift your body weight one time, I think that's off to a usable start, a useful start.
Yeah, but what's good? If you could say like everybody, I want you to. If everybody gets to this level on my crew, I'll be happy. That's where I put like 225 to 250 getting off the ground.
I mean, we always used, so at LGN, we used, so double body weight was good for deadlift. 1.5 times was good. Yeah. And then 185 was not 185. One time is your body weight is, you're trending in the right direction. Under that, we need some work.
Okay. Push-ups?
6 because I suck at them.
Because I'm working on 7.
Yeah. Push-ups. Good push-ups, like real push-ups. 30. I
think 30 is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plank hold?
90 seconds at least.
Okay. What else do you think there is? Overhead press, something like that? Nah. Like pull-up, push-ups, and squats, or lifting off the ground is where I get the big couple of them in, right? I don't even care about like mile times, 5K times, anything like that necessarily. That's a totally different conversation, first of all. That's a different endurance one. So but I also thought when I was thinking of this, like, so for pure strength, if you can do 225 one time for pure strength, cool, right? For endurance-wise, muscular endurance, not cardio endurance, but muscular endurance, how many times would you want somebody to be able to lift 200 to 225 pounds?
Continuously, 8 to 10-ish.
I was gonna say 8.
Yeah,
I was gonna say because that's enough to have to breathe several times. Yeah, and like consciously reset and pay attention to what you're doing. Right. Yeah. I can only remember one time, in my career that I was at red line with lifting someone. Really? And it was like, oh yeah, and like the warning bell started going off immediately. It was this really big fella, and it was just me and one other person because they were just in this terrible spot between the bed and the wall, and so there was no help to be given otherwise. And he was adamant that like if you get me up halfway, I can stand up. I'm just stuck in here. My legs don't work so good. And I was like, dude, like our best bet is to get you halfway up and like someone uses a battering ram and hits you onto the bed, and then we go from there. Like it was dire, you know. And this guy was having a medical thing going on, and so it was me and another guy, and I think someone was able to hold the feet. I think that we were able to just concentrate on lifting with the Samson strap while someone chalked the feet. And we got him a third of the way up. Yeah. And I was on my toes, and I felt every bit of tension through my body. Yeah. And my brain was like, drop this guy right now. Right. like stuff was starting to feel really uncomfortable in my midsection and my back. Yeah. And for some reason, he like put a foot back and kind of grabbed on the bed and like came with us. But I can vividly remember like, whoa, that was red line. Like that was as close to failing as I'm gonna get.
I'm not sure I've made it there carrying anyone.
And then I was like, were you lifting at all? Talking to the other guy? Like, what is going on?
What are you doing over there?
I really expected more from you. Because there was a panic moment in my brain of like, you need to get out of this situation right now. But that's why I say like 200, 225, 250. Yeah. Because you figure if you have 250 pounds of capacity, and so do I, we can each pitch in 50% to a 200-pound person, which is average or below average, and we still have 100 pounds in reserve to mess up, basically, right? And I wonder how many people would think that 225 pounds from the ground with a trap bar or something like that is unreasonable.
I am thinking of my red line now. So we were in kind of downtown. There was a user, we'll say,
a system user
who was struggling in their attic, and they had one of those like super steep staircases that came down from the attic, and we had to put them in a reeve sleeve, and 2 of us were on top with rope hose tools, like guiding them down, but like kind of on our sides down the stairs. And I remember getting down from that, and my grip was like, that was like, I felt like I had Popeye forearms after that. Like I couldn't open my hands all the way. Like that was my one red line, where I remember looking over at the person next to me and being like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm like, good thing this guy's unconscious right now, so he doesn't feel the fall when we get down there.
Toboggan downstairs. Oh, dude. Are any other strength metrics or standards or anything popping out at you?
No, I mean,
like we use baseline fitness testing for our new hires.
Yeah.
There's like the 1 foot. You do like, I'm not even that familiar with it because you do most of that.
Yeah. So our baseline fitness test that we do is a push. It's a max effort push. So what we do in it is we do a lower body power, which we use a single leg broad jump for. And we do that, 1, because it's a good measurable, but 2, if there's like a 10% deviation between the 2, that's kind of a red flag that you can help out with. So we do that. We do a pillar hold, which we're looking for 90 seconds out of it. We do our upper body endurance is push-ups. And so basically that's max effort push-ups without dropping to your knees. So however many you can do until then. Our upper body strength is pull-ups. And then our lower body endurance is we drop the seat down on a spin bike, and we have people ride for 3 minutes and see what distance they can cover. And so it's 5 events: upper body strength, an upper body endurance, lower body strength, lower body endurance, and then a core stability assessment.
Do you have any kind of median in your brain right now that you can run through? Not ideal, but like a realistic look at what most people I feel like we've had a pretty broad spectrum of ability levels come in.
Lately, I would say we're between like 20 on the low end for push-ups, getting close to the 60s for push-ups. Pull-ups, 0 to, I think we had one guy rack out 20. Pillar, I stop them at 90. Most people can make it to that. Broad jump, if you can top 70, that's a pretty good one. Basically a 2-legged broad jump, if you can jump your height, that's pretty solid athletically. So obviously you'll cut that down a little bit for 1 leg on each. What's the last one I'm missing? Push-ups, pull-ups, bike distance. It's always different depending on who goes first, because the first guy's the pace setter, and then everyone knows what number to beat. But I think if you can get a mile to a mile and a quarter, I think that's about pretty good for most people in that.
Because they can set their own resistance on it too.
Yeah,
right?
They can adjust position and resistance as much as they want.
So that's a interesting one to see too. If people go light and try to fly with it, or like dig in heavy, figuring they're covering more per revolution.
So most people, I think if we have a group, the first guy usually ends up being, like maybe 0.8, 0.9, and then the other 2 are like, oh, okay, well, now.
Smash it.
Yeah.
Saw how that guy did.
Yep.
So on the consumption course, I just thought of another metric that might be useful. With our consumption course, we coach the people to go pretty hard in it. Like, I want to see a realistic value of how much work you can do within 1 bottle. So the goal isn't to go absolutely nuts and be done in 3 minutes, but get 25 laps in. And on the other side too, don't do 2 laps but last 45 minutes. We teach them like, let's move with some urgency, and I prompt them along very constructively through it, like very encouraging and very warm. But we had a battalion chief that said, when I put a company in the building, I look at when they go in, and I expect them to be at least in there for 10 minutes. Like at 10 minutes, I'm thinking of rotating them out, and I jot down the time and I pay attention to that. So if you're less than 10 minutes, you're kind of mucking up my works. Like that means that if you're done at 8 minutes, I need another company ready 2 minutes sooner, which kind of waterfalls down how many people we need on scene, and just the whole thing can blow up. So I started sharing that with people going through the consumption course of like, we're looking for 10 minutes here. And I don't show them the clock or give them updates during it. I just keep trying to tell them to either go faster or slower or whatever. And I would say that we're probably we're probably 50-50 of like people who are right at the 10-minute mark, over or under. And not many people are that far under. It's usually right at like 9 minutes or something like that. They go on bells. Go on bells, yeah. And then some people are like 12, 13 minutes, you know. But that was something very useful for us because like the consumption course is good at showing trends year to year and throughout your first year and all that. But overall, like, what can people expect? Because since we went from quarter service to third service alarms on the low air alarms, we're almost seeing like 50% alarms, where it's, if you have 9 minutes working, you're probably done at 20 minutes altogether. Yeah. Which is surprising, but you almost have more time on bells sometimes than you do not on bells before that. So if you need a metric to work to, if you are going through your consumption course or you're doing something with a pack on, measuring that in a smart way without working out in gear, or you're doing drills, you're like doing continuous searches or evolutions, and you can keep a stopwatch going, 10 minutes of working time while on air is what one of the guys at our department suggests, and I think that's a pretty realistic thing.
I think it's realistic.
I think moving hard through a house is 10 minutes is a long time.
That's a long time to get
moving through a house. Yeah. So keep that in mind too. If you need something more direct to the fire service instead of just lifting and doing good at whatever you're doing, 10 minutes on air is a good measure if you're working hard. 10 minutes sitting around is not anything. But if you're working hard at a legit pace, 10 minutes is pretty good. And what should be, I think, kind of the lower acceptable limit. Yeah. If we're below 10 minutes working hard, then we should probably figure something out to make that better. I think we did good not condemning many people. Yeah. We didn't like exclude many people. No. It's a hard kind of hard truth fire service, you know, like at a certain point you're gonna have to do some heavy stuff and some fast stuff. Right. And if you can't, people know that, but people will also see that. Right. So I think it's worth throwing some expectations out there. And I'm also just fortunate that the crew we have now would have no problem with any of those things. So it's not like I'm not hurting anybody's feelings because I don't have to see them on Friday. Right. So, all right, dude, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Cool, man. All right, we'll check out the affiliates I mentioned in the beginning, Rescue One CBD and Fourth Frontier. We'll talk to you guys soon. Got some interviews coming up, so that'll be cool. And in a few short weeks, you're out of here.
Like you're out of here.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Nap time is not a constraint anymore. You might be in the garage or the office doing some episodes, maybe even outside. You never know. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. Be a 4-shifter.